Hi everyone, my name's Joe. I started this little clothing brand last week called the Inward Markings Garment Company. It's a social enterprise. Portions from each sale will go to a community initiative that you identify, except for the skateboarding related designs, which will go to the GoFundMe of a Melbourne skater and filmer who is vital to the skating community in this city. He's undergoing cancer treatment, which is totally fucked. But it's heartening that he has access to that treatment and that there's been so much amazing support from the skating community. I mean, stand up people, dudes. Stand up fucking people. The first 5 chapters of this vlog are up on this channel. Please watch those to make sense of today. If you're offended easily, or you've got no time for people engaging in alternative lifestyles or anything like that, then yeah, please tune out now, because we've all got finite time in terms of this present life. So yeah, tune out now and go fucking do whatever it is that that makes you most fulfilled. So this is an interesting location because something that I'll talk about in later vlogs is synchronicities and serendipitous events. The reason, just quickly again, why I'm doing this series in a chronological way and leading back to early childhood is that the last 22 or so months leading up to the formation of this brand have been so meaningful and unexpected and extraordinary that it's caused me to reassess my life previously, and a part of that has been a gradual intensification that has really built up over this last period of serendipitous events, which at the time, like anyone, you just write off as, oh, that's just a random occurrence that occurred, or a nice little coincidence. But yeah, my understanding has been transformed by this last couple of years. I did a Bachelor of Creative Arts at one of the universities here and was living around this area, and caught a tram into the CBD one day, and it just so happened that there was a fellow student on the tram, and we got talking about stuff, and she said that she actually went to high school at a school further back along the tram line near where my house was, and that she was in the same year level as Geoffrey Rush, one of Geoffrey Rush's daughters. I think he's got more than one at that time. And subsequent to that conversation, during the middle of the day, and I think it was further into the depth of winter, and it was similar to today, but probably it was more overcast, more grey, but incredibly windy, really windy, similar to how windy the day when on the occasion that I went to that big Audio Dynamite concert from the first episode. And I was walking across the bridge that's just over there, and there was literally no one around, and there might have been the odd passing car, but it was eerily and unusually quiet. And I just remember seeing this figure walking towards me off in the distance and looking at the ground, but with this huge overcoat, waistcoat, not waistcoat, yeah, like those long down to the ankle raincoats that you often see in movies set in New York, and they've got the belt that gets tied around the middle. I'm pretty sure you know what I mean. And they're often like a beige colour, and because he'd left it, Geoffrey Rush had left it open, the coat was flapping around behind him, similar to a cape, and there was something kind of unsettling about this oncoming figure. And it was only when I got closer that I realised it was Geoffrey Rush, and I said something, and he briefly acknowledged me, but he seemed deep in thought and kind of troubled as well. It might have just been that he was sick of people recognising him. I'm not sure if this was pre-Pirates of the Caribbean, And then we crossed paths and went our separate ways. And as I said at the time, I just thought it was just like a random coincidence. But based on things that have happened subsequent and also prior, there's been a build that's been part of like a build up of similar kind of events, to the point where it just got just became overwhelming in the period leading up to last week. So where I left off with the last episode is the bank incident, and around that time, as I've mentioned, there was just all these factors, and if you want to talk about the universe leading me into directions where it seemed unavoidable. Like it seemed like I needed to undertake a period of heroin use that led to physical dependence. And one of those factors was of course arriving in Melbourne at that time when that epidemic was occurring. But also I have had a mysterious lower back accident lower back injury, that I could not attribute and no one else could attribute to any cause or accident that occurred, and it led to prescription morphine. So what was interesting about it is that the diagnosis, like, I didn't know that's what occurred, but then the pain got unbearable to the point where I had to see someone. And around the time that I was first prescribed that morphine, I wasn't really using heroin. I was trying to like move on to something else in my life. So there was like the universe was like, no, this is what you need to do. And so so around that time I was doing that degree, but was getting more involved with what's called harm reduction and the community development side of that. So working with people who use drugs, especially young people, to try and provide education, but also to provide experiences that would help, I guess, humanize people's lives, given that they were incredibly marginalized and prior to their drug use had often come from really shitty backgrounds and home environments. And the thing about the area I worked in called peer education is that in hindsight, I now kind of understand this. If the universe hadn't directed me onto paths where I became dependent on opiates, then I would have had no legitimacy in that area of work, because as you can imagine, people who use illicit drugs, or with anything really, there's a lack of credibility if someone hasn't had that personal life experience themselves, and especially because it's illegal. So young people as well, but that's across the board with young people, but especially where drug use is involved, there's a major importance placed on people with that experience, if one is going to, provide education or share information. So it's not just about some kind of academic or understanding, or someone preaching at people who use drugs. And so if the bullying in primary school wasn't enough, and the shit that I went through as a young person, the universe was then like, well, now we're going to put you in the fucking lowest layer of society, where there will pretty much be no one who respects you based on your lifestyle, regardless of, how you try and explain your life to them. And you'll have legal attention. You'll basically be the scum of the earth. But on the other hand, you'll be able to do this really important work with people who really need genuine support. And that's what I proceeded to do. And I used drugs throughout that time, not because I wanted to maintain legitimacy, but as I explained in the last episode, it was just what I felt I needed to do. It was intuitive. And part of it, yeah, of course, there was the health aspect, but I would say to people at that time, and I feel the same now, even if there was no physical dependence, I would have continued to use the drug. It was serving a purpose in my life at that time that was that I would say is profound. And there'll be people watching this and so forth. Oh, this is that fucking junkie guy who started the clothing company. Well, I never called myself a junkie, and it's something that I still don't do now because, as I said last episode, drugs have never been or were never an end in and of themselves. It was something that was part of my life and played a significant and particular role. And I wasn't, just trying to get off my face and doing whatever it took to do that. Not only was I working or studying or doing something for that whole time, but my intent regarding addressing what I considered to be injustice and unfairness and trying to make a difference, that was integral to what I was doing. And at no point did I prioritize my drug use over those personal politics, if you like. And even outside my work in the harm reduction field, the conversations I'd have with people on drugs were always about sharing my ideas and hearing what other people thought, etc. So yeah, it was part of this far more involved picture than you'll probably receive through a lot of media sources. And the drugs were just one factor. Sure, they were significant, but they were just one factor of a much bigger picture. And so I'm just going to retell an experience now from my time in the field, because as you may or may not be able to imagine, it's the kind of field that people can get stuck in, especially in the area that I was in, because if drug use is that big a part of your life that it's it's kind of for life, then it's going to be difficult to kind of find employment or to find some kind of direction outside of an area where you're considered to be a specialist or to have expertise and get paid decently. And maybe a more straightforward way to look at it is once you enter that kind of field and are accepted for who you are and that kind of thing, it's very enticing to continue with that. And also for me, a part of it that would have played into it is being kind of confounded about how my life had gone in a direction that I had no expectation regarding, and the intensity of the physical dependence was something that was unprecedented in my life. So, even for the sake of ease and just trying to do things as comfortably as possible, it would have made entire sense for me to just become a lifelong employee of that field. But again, this is where what I'm starting to realize now, it's like the universe fucking brought things into my life that meant that was only a temporary phase. Even though the politics for me are still important, but I certainly have different. Yeah, my understanding of kind of how the funded sector works in relation to the bigger picture is different, and that will emerge from this story. So, I experienced bullying while I was working in peer education, because there's a set, like in anything, there's a segment of people, or maybe it's a little bit different because of the nature of illicit drug use, etc. But there might still be, but there was a tendency for people who are just like, who needed to find employment or who need to find something in their lives because they're either, in a home situation where it's like, fuck, you can't, or some legal ramification just led them to a point where they were like, fuck, I've got to do something with my life. I can't just, get off my head, get off my face, as my daily mission. So, and also the peer education area was just kind of building from a small base at that point. It's a lot more developed now, and so people without any kind of real passion for the issues and without any kind of intent regarding making a difference would become employed simply because they had experience of drug use. And so that's something that anyone can do. You could be, as is the case, you could be like from a completely right-wing, closed-minded background and and have a history of whatever drug use. And so that I clashed with that kind of consistently because that wasn't my priority. Like, my investment in doing that work wasn't to fucking get a paycheck every fortnight so I could continue my drug use. That was just something that played into it. And so one way in which that bullying played out was around resource use. So it's only something that I fully understood later, but things were made very difficult in terms of just doing daily work because of people kind of teaming up and ganging up and preventing access to important resources like cars, computers, things like that. And so initially I just thought, it's just dickhead behaviour. But something really extraordinary happened. So after those epidemic conditions, I think they petered out a little bit, but it was still fairly strong. And then suddenly, I can't remember anyone talking about it, and just being something that just kind of appeared literally like one day during like the holiday period, the Christmas holiday period one year. A drought like struck Melbourne, a heroin drought. There was no... I distinctly remember like there being this contrast between business as usual and then nothing. Extraordinary. It was outlandish, and so the events of one of those days led to me meeting up with a couple of people, and who I didn't normally associate with, just to try and find some kind of access. And I think it was like one of the holidays, like maybe Boxing Day. And so one of those people finally had luck, and the rendezvous was one of the major parks near the CBD. And so we waited there for quite a long time, and we were both exhausted because it had been a long process. And amazingly, well, not amazingly, but totally unexpectedly, the car that drove up was one of the cars of the organisation that I was working for. And that then set off a chain of events. Obviously, I was disgruntled by it, and then because that stuff then played out further when I returned to work, it just became untenable for me to remain working there. with that knowledge, and I moved on. But it was certainly a role. I was in that role for what, 5 or so years. That if something like that hadn't eventuated, I'd probably still be there now, just out of just the comfort of getting paid a regular wage and doing something that I'm passionate about. But events that, like, if you were in Melbourne at that time when that drought occurred, no one could comprehend it. It just struck so suddenly, in an environment where people have become very accustomed to just very easy access to the drugs. So, and then for the contact that the person I don't normally associate with, to have been the colleague from my organisation, and of course that person, when they took the call from the person I was with, they wouldn't have asked, "Oh, who are you with?" or "You." That it was just something that they wouldn't have expected either. But just the way things worked out, what was actually going on became revealed to me, and what's most meaningful about it is the way that it then led me to the next stage of my life. This story will not seem like that big a deal on its own, but I hope that over time it will fit in like the stories of other episodes, and most significantly this idea of a destined process, and feeling that I've needed to undergo both good and bad experiences in order to get to where I am now. So it's really challenging, because when we're going through those experiences at the time, we don't have an understanding of where this could lead to. But maybe it's something that people can have more of an understanding as we know more about the way life can work, or does work. And as I've said in previous episodes, I'm not suggesting that anyone follow my footsteps, or I'm not presenting myself as a role model or any kind of guru. I'm just sharing my experiences because I think it's a worthwhile process. Inwardmarkings.com. The Instagram is @inwardmarkings. And please tune in for episode 7 if this is of interest. That will be uploaded tomorrow. Thank you kindly. See ya.